Welcome to the TaxExact webinars. My name is Andy Vongdar and I'll be your host today. The purpose of these webinars are to get new users with the TaxExact software more comfortable preparing tax returns. I know that tax season is coming up right around the corner on January 30th, and we'd like to make sure everybody's comfortable using the software and preparing new returns. So my sole purpose here is to make sure you guys feel comfortable preparing returns by the time tax season starts. Now we'll be doing webinars every Friday for TaxExact members at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can find a schedule of our webinar at our website at www.taxexactmembers.com. We will post these webinars to our website so that you can go back and view these if you need to brush up on anything, or if you missed anything, or need to show anybody else in your office any of these videos. In this week's webinar, we're going to cover your speed of refund clients. Those are typically your EIC clients that are coming into your office at the beginning of tax season. Typically, they're EIC, low income, W-2s, real simple returns. So we're going to start the return in interview mode, and we're going to cover that in just a little bit. A few things I want to talk about though before we get started is some of the things that the webinars won't cover. We're not going to cover any troubleshooting, installation, networking, rejects. That's what we have our technical support line for. They're actually open from 8 a.m. Central Standard Time to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time during the tax season. And that number is 866-829-9777. Again, 866-829-9777. And if that isn't enough, we also have training videos and an online manual, a training manual. That manual is great. If you read through that manual, I can assure you that you're going to feel comfortable with the tax software by the time tax season starts. And that can be found at the website also at www.taxexactmembers.com. If you have any questions after viewing this webinar, please feel free to email me at andy@trxsoftware.com. Again, that's andy@trxsoftware.com. Alright, so we're going to get started with a new return here. But let's go over the home page first. When you first open up the software and you log in, you're going to see this home page. This home page has your shortcuts here to get started. We have new return, open return, user return maintenance, which is going to be where you move and delete returns, print return, send e-files, upload and download returns between offices, download your tax software updates, and registering your software when you first get it. Going across the top, we have some shortcuts also. Some of them are the same: new return, open return, save, print, calculator, close return, your after the fact payroll, your tax estimator, your unlock and lock return feature, and your cloud EFC and appointment scheduler. So let's start a new return. When you press the new return button, this is going to open up the new tax return screen. The first option here is to choose between individual module or business module. 1040 versus 1065's 1120s. So we'll stick with 1040 today. We'll key in our social security number. And it indicated that we've already created that social security number, so let's try a new one. Alright. We'll choose our filing status here. Now we have two different modes of entry, the interview mode and the input mode. If we press interview mode, it'll start the return in interview mode rather than pressing OK and going to input mode. Now interview mode is for your support staff during the beginning of tax season. Mainly they're going to be your data entry type employees, where they maybe work the front and enter in data while you're with their clients. The great thing about interview mode is whenever your support staff is done filling in the information, it'll flow back to your computer if you have your computers networked. So therefore they can get the basic information already entered before they even come back to see you. So when I press interview mode, we're gonna see this screen here, which is our interview mode. If you notice, there's some tabs going across the top. This is what interview mode encompasses. We have your personal information, dependents, EIC due diligence for the dependents and taxpayer, your W-2 information, prepare information, refund options, and filing information. So I'm going to start by filling in some basic information. key in our address down here at the bottom, type in our zip code, and the city and state will fill out by itself. Now we can press the next button, or we can come up here and choose the tab we want to go to. So the next screen is our dependent screen. If we click on this screen here, we'll be able to open up our dependent list. Dependent list here at the top and our dependent information here at the bottom. To enter a new dependent in, we'll press the new button, which will open up the information down here at the bottom. And we'll begin to enter our information. Now the relationship drop-down is blank right now, but that's going to help us in the future. I'm going to show you guys some things in software later, but that should have a selection here. That is something we're working on fixing. So we're going to hit save on this dependent, and what it's going to do, it's going to save this dependent information up here to the top. Now if we want to edit that dependent, we'll click the edit button. If we need to add a new one, we'll press that button, the new button. Let's go on to the next screen, the dependent EIC due diligence. Like I said, the interview mode is mainly for EIC clients, so that's why we have this built into the interview mode. We'll highlight our dependent and answer the questions based off the taxpayer's response. Okay. If we answer the questions correctly and press save, we'll notice that you are now eligible to claim EIC for this dependent. The taxpayer EIC due diligence. Again, due diligence is very important when doing EIC. So let's go ahead and fill these questions out. And then go on to the next screen. The next screen is your W-2 information. You can enter W-2s under the interview mode and the input mode. So you can choose to do it now or later. We're going to go ahead and put one W-2 in now, and I'll show you guys how to put a W-2 in under input mode. First we'll press new, and then that will open up our information down here at the bottom. Type in our EIN number, and we do have an EIN database, so whenever we use this EIN number again, it'll remember everything I'm typing in these lines below. Key in our wages, and then press save. The next screen is your prepare information. There's multiple ways of entering prepare information. I feel like the best way is, or one of the easiest ways, is entering a prepare ID number, which is this first line. Let's just use real simple numbers like the number 1. Whenever I type 1 in there, I'm going to fill out the information below it, but the next time I come back here and I enter number 1 in the prepare ID, it'll remember all the information that I'm keying in here on the bottom. Works just the same way as an EIN database would. Alright, let's move on to the next screen. Refund and payment options. It's real simple. We're just going to select direct deposit and enter our routing and account number. Okay, and the very last screen on your interview mode is going to set up your input mode. If you answer yes to any of these questions, it's going to populate the necessary forms in the input mode. For example, do you have any bank interest? If we put yes, we can enter a payer's name and an amount received, and this will populate a Schedule B on the tax return. Did you have any unemployment or state refunds? We'll say yes. Did you receive any alimony? We'll say no. Were you at any time during the year self-employed? If we say yes here, it'll add a Schedule C to the tax return. We'll say no for the rest of these questions and move on to the input mode. To get to the input mode, we can press input mode right here, right after we save this interview process. Okay, now that we're in input mode, you'll notice that you'll have the form right there in the middle, the entire form. On the left-hand side, you'll have your forms tree, which is going to list all the forms that we have in this return. Going across the top, we have our shortcuts. Going back to interview mode, switching to Spanish, save, print, calculator, auto error check, and we'll go over printing and auto error check in today's webinar. Adding a form, removing a form, closing the return, your quick tax refund estimator. And I want to go over this real quick. Form peek. If we select this button here, the right hand side will populate the form that we're looking at currently in the middle. For example, if we go to 1040, it'll populate the 1040. So I know a lot of preparers like to look at the actual form as they're doing the tax return. Then we also have unlock the return, our cloud EFC, and our appointment scheduler that we went over before. So for now I'm going to keep this form peek closed, but that feature is there. So let's go over a few things on the forms tree. Let's start at the very top. Notice the client information sheet has a red box to the left of it. What that means is there's information missing on this form. So if we look at the client information sheet, we'll see it's just real basic stuff: filing status, personal information, and dependent information, stuff that we've already covered. If you remember from earlier, the relationship drop-down box was not populating anything. That is why this form is red. It wants us to select something here. But we'll go back and change that later. Let's go on to the next form, return information sheet. Real basic information again. There are some red lines that we do need to address, so we're going to go ahead and choose these. Enter our PIN numbers. And notice how once we clear out all the red information on this form, the return on the form on the left hand side on the return information sheet is blue. Okay, let's get into the 1040 now. Now, a few things I want to point out on the 1040 are these yellow and blue lines. Okay, if you see a line that is yellow, a yellow line means that it's a calculated entry. For example, line 7 of the 1040 is a calculated line because it pulls information over from the W2. Calculated lines mean that the number that appears on this line is being calculated elsewhere in a different form. You're not allowed to type anything in here. Now if you see a blue line, that is a manual entry line where you can key in amounts there. Now we don't recommend this often, but if there's a case on a calculated line where you know the number that needs to be there is different and you can't figure out how to calculate it, first off I would recommend calling our support team for them to look at it first. But you also have the override feature. On any calculated line you can right click, drop down to override. This will change it from a calculated entry to a manual entry. And then now you can type in any number you'd like. Again, we don't recommend doing that often. There are workarounds to doing an override, such as going to the forms that link to this line and figuring out how to make it calculate correctly, because the program should calculate the amounts correctly. Okay, so let's look into these calculated fields again. If we double click on a calculated line like line 7 of the 1040, it'll bring up a list of all the forms associated with this return, or not with this return, with this line. So we double clicked on line 7 and it brought up all the forms that can flow back to line 7. We've already added a W2 to this return, so to add another one we can double click on line 7 like we just did, and then double click on the new W2 here. Another way of adding forms is coming to add form here at the very top. If you come up here and press that button, you'll see a list of all the forms that go to the 1040. You can search your forms up here at the very top. So if we need Schedule C, we can type in that information, schedule. Okay. If we need the W2, we can start typing in W2 and it'll bring up all the W2s. While we're on the screen, I'm going to go ahead and go over adding a state to the return. The button right below this search field is Select State. If you press this button, it'll bring up your Select State screen. So far we have no states installed on this software program. However, when you download and install your states, you will see them listed here at the very top. Then you'll select the filing status of full year, non-year resident, or part year resident, and then press Add. Press OK, and then you'll come back to the State tab. The State tab will now list all of the forms associated with your state. Another way of adding a state is going to the return information sheet. There's a button here in the top right that says Add Remove State. Brings up the same screen. Now let's go back to adding that W-2. It's going to ask us how many W-2s we want to add. We'll just say one more. Notice how on the left hand side in the forms tree now, there's another W-2 listed right below the original one we had. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the 1040 and see how these two W-2s have affected our return. Remember I said that calculated lines calculate from other forms. So this 27,000 is coming from the result of our first W-2 and our second W-2, 15,000 plus 12,000. Line 7 is now showing 27,000. Let's continue on in the return. Next form down from the W-2 is our Schedule B. On the Schedule B, if we have more than one payer, we can press the Add Statement button, and you can list as many pairs as you'd like, and if you need to delete any of these rows, we can check the red X here on the right hand side. But we'll go ahead and add one more payer. We'll go back to the 1040, and it should show 300 on taxable interest. Same thing works for ordinary dividends on the Schedule B. Alright, let's move on to the next form, 1099-G. Let's say, for instance, in this case, we did not mean to add the 1099-G, we don't need it anymore, and we need to remove this form from the return. What we can do is we can right-click on the form on the forms tree and go to Remove Form, or we can single-click it with a left click and come up here to Remove Form. Alright, next form, Schedule C. What we're going to do today is we're going to go over depreciation on Schedule C. We're going to touch it just briefly today in today's webinar. In future webinars we may get into more detail on that. But I'm going to go ahead and fill out some basic information on this W-2. And then we're going to go to line 13 for depreciation. Remember, I told you guys, if you guys need to do any depreciation or do anything on a calculated line, we're going to double click on line 13 and it'll give us a list of forms that we can link to. So we're going to link to the 4562 for our depreciation. Whenever we try to link a 4562, it asks you which form that 4562 needs to go to. We're going to select the Schedule C that we're currently on. Okay, now that we're on the 4562, you'll notice here on the left hand side, under your Schedule C, tabbed in just a few centimeters here, is your form 4562. That is how we know that the 4562 is linked to the Schedule C, and that's tabbed in and directly below it. A new feature in our software this year is the Asset Depreciation Summary. This button right here, if we press this button here, it'll bring up the screen where we can enter all of our depreciation for the Schedule C. We can add multiple rows, just like on Schedule B, and delete them out as we need to. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter in some assets here. We're going to do some computers, date, place, and service. We can skip Schedule E information, our cost basis, minus our land value, minus the prior year 179. Indicate that it's 100% business use, and select our depreciation class. For our second item, we're going to depreciate some furniture. Okay, let's say on this item we're going to take the 179 deduction for the full amount. Enter it here on this line here. Current year 179. Press save. And then we'll notice on the left hand side here, under our 4562, we have depreciation worksheets. The asset depreciation summary creates a worksheet for each item that we're depreciating. So if we click on the first one, we'll see that the computers is the first sheet here that we're depreciating. Scroll down to line 12. We'll notice we have a current year depreciation of $700 and next year depreciation of $520. On our second worksheet, the furniture, come down to line 12. There's nothing there because we're taking the full amount under section 179. Since everything flows back, let's go ahead and go look at the 4562. We'll see that on line 12 we have $44,000 of current year 179 deduction. Scroll down a little further to part 3 and we'll see our current year depreciation of $700, and on line 22 a total of $4,700 being depreciated. If we go back to the Schedule C now, we'll see on line 13 that $4,700 has carried over. Alright, let's say we finished the return for this taxpayer. We're going to go back to the 1040 and take a look at it, review all the numbers, make sure everything looks right. What we want to do now that we're done with the return, we want to do the auto error check. The auto error check will check the tax return for any errors in the software. Now, anything that's found in the auto error check doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be rejected by the IRS or anything. It's just kind of a red cautionary flag. So when we press auto error check, we'll still see our form here at the top, but at the bottom we'll see a list of rejects that we have. If we click on each one, it'll jump the form to exactly where that error was. For example, our relationship dropdown is showing a red error there. We won't be able to clear it out on our webinar today, but we'll move on to the next one. Now once we're done clearing out our errors, we can press reevaluate. It'll clear out the ones that we've already gone through and checked. So it just leaves a few. Like I said, these won't stop the return from being accepted or rejected or anything like that for the most part. So we'll assume that this return is done. We'll close out of this. Now that we believe the return to be done, we want to print off the return for our clients. The best way to go to print options is to press this print button here to print the form you're looking at. Or we can hit the drop down to print selected forms or print the entire return. If we select print preview, it'll bring up a screen where we can choose how we want to print. Preview to print will create the return in a PDF format to view and print. If we press send to file cabinet, it'll create the PDF and send it to a saved spot on your computer, on your hard drive. So right now we're going to preview to print and press OK. Now that we press preview to print, the entire tax return is now listed in PDF format for you to review and print off if you feel necessary. I know a lot of tax preparers don't like to print every form, so we have the print selected forms option. We press that option under the print menu. It'll bring up a list of forms we have that we can choose to print. For example, let's say we only want the 1040 for a taxpayer copy. We'll check box there, press OK, preview to print, and it appears in PDF, ready to print. Okay, and that wraps up our webinar today. We've covered interview mode, speed of refund clients, how to best use your support staff, entering your EIC information. Then we jump to input mode, how to add a form, how to remove a form, your forms tree, your depreciation, what the colors on the lines mean, calculated entries versus manual entries, We covered printing and form linking. If you guys have any questions after viewing this video, I'm going to remind you guys we have our support team from 8 a.m. Central to 9 p.m. Central during tax season. The number is 866-829-9777. We also are going to post this webinar along with our online training videos at www.taxexactmembers.com. And also on there is a training manual. It's a great manual that I definitely recommend anybody trying to learn the software to check out. Again, my name's Andy, and I hope you enjoyed our webinar today. Have a great day.